SIU head advocate Andy Mothibi has been appointed as the next National Director of Public Prosecutions. He'll assume the role from the 1st of next month as the tenure of the incumbent in Shamila Batohi comes to an end. Last month, the advisory panel interviewed 6 candidates for the position. However, it's understood it submitted to Ramaphosa that none was suitable. Let's speak a bit more about Ramaphosa's decision now with the Executive Director of the Council for the Advancement of the South African Constitution in Lawson, Naidoo, who joins us via our video link. Lawson, great to see you as always. Thanks very much indeed for helping us make sense of this moment, which I think has taken some people by surprise. Some of us were expecting at least one of those 6 candidates to be announced. But given, I suppose, what you saw in those interviews and what we know about Andy Mothibi, are you surprised?
Well, I think it has been a little bit of a surprise that the announcement came about in the way that it did, especially as the President had instituted this advisory panel late last year to assist him in identifying the next National Director of Public Prosecutions. But I guess it wasn't a surprise that the panel's report to the President said that there was no one amongst the 6 that they interviewed that they could confidently recommend for the position. But it is a concern, I think, that the President has simply gone ahead and appointed Advocate Mothibi as the next NDPP, whilst his appointment is to be welcomed for very good reasons. I think the concern lies around the fact that the President might have been better served in asking that panel to interview Advocate Mothibi to determine his suitability for office, and very importantly, to ensure that there's public confidence in his appointment. Those of us that watch the criminal justice sector closely would be familiar with Andy Mothibi's work at the SIU in particular, but many South Africans may not, and I think that has been a misstep by the presidency in this regard.
Yeah.
But having said that, Andy Mothibi's appointment is to be welcomed. I think he brings a great wealth of experience, skill and knowledge to the position.
The SIU, of course, works relatively differently to the NPA, and we'll speak about that in just a moment. I just want to pick up from what you've just mentioned about this skipping of the public interview process. I mean, I've seen, for example, some people already writing that, in fact, there are valid grounds to question the fairness of his appointment, given the fact that he wasn't put through the fire, so to speak, like the other candidates.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a legitimate concern that he hasn't been subjected to the kind of scrutiny that the other 6 candidates were, which enabled the panel to come to a conclusion that none of them were suitable for appointment. Now, you know, I may be confident in saying that Andy Mothibi is a great appointment, but there may be many others who don't know his background in the kind of detail to be able to come to that same conclusion. So I think it would have been advantageous both for him, for the President, and for the NPA for this public process to have been followed.
More about why you're confident nonetheless in what he brings to this position. I mean, I understand he was born in Hammanskraal. He completed high school in Zeerast in the Northwest. He became an advocate and then really went up the ranks as a public prosecutor and a magistrate in Gauteng. But from what you've been able to observe so far, yeah, what gives you the level of confidence you have this Wednesday morning that he's up to the task?
Well, you know, I think it's the combination of skills that Andy Mothibi will bring to the position. He's run an organization. He's led the SIU for a number of years now, very successfully. It's been one of the most successful anti-corruption instruments that we have in South Africa, and a lot of the credit for that must go to him. So, you know, he's got the leadership, managerial expertise, and experience of running an organization. But the NPA is a very different and a very complex organization, so it's not going to be an easy transition for him. I'm sure he recognizes that. He's worked closely with the NPA over a number of years in collaboration amongst law enforcement agencies to understand some of the problems that the NPA has, some of the challenges that he's going to have to face as he takes over at the beginning of next month. But I think he comes with that understanding, the respect from the public, his integrity, I think, is unquestioned. And he would be, but he's going to require a lot of support from within the NPA, but also, importantly, there are legislative changes that are necessary to institutionalize the operational and financial autonomy of the National Prosecuting Authority away from the Department of Justice. And we've had commitments from the President and the Minister of Justice to that effect. But we have yet to see legislation being tabled to give effect to that autonomy that is necessary.
Right, and Shamila Batohi has also been very vocal about some of the challenges she was confronted with in the NPA, albeit, I guess the level of disappointment some people have about how much headway she's been able to do. The question then, and I suppose you've answered it in some respects, is whether or not Andy Mothibi is drinking from a poisoned chalice if those legislative changes, for example, are not seen through.
Well, indeed. I mean, I think, if those challenges are not addressed and the NPA is not adequately resourced to be able to bring in the kind of skills that are required to successfully prosecute these complex commercial and corruption cases, then Andy Mothibi is going to be as frustrated as Shamila Batohi was. So this is an opportunity for the president to ensure that Mr. Advocate Mothibi has all the tools at his disposal to be able to really take the NPA to the level of really being the lawyers for the people to successfully prosecute criminal cases.
Yeah. It's also an opportunity for us to see how previous NDPPs have fared over the years. I mean, we can take it all the way back to Bulelani Nguka, who served between 1998 and 2004. He resigned before his term ended. Vusi Pikoli followed. He was suspended before his term ended. Menzi Simelane, I mean, we were all reminded of some of the controversy around him when he tried to get the job back. There were Sean Abrahams along the way, and Shamila Batohi now being the first person in years, quite frankly, to be able to finish a term as the head of the NPA. The question becomes, how confident are you that at the end of this, Andy Mothibi's reputation will be as intact as you believe it is as he starts his tenure next month?
Well, it's going to be a hugely challenging role for him. And as you pointed out, Shamila Batohi is the first NDPP to have served a full term, albeit only 7 years of the tenure. She's forced to retire because of her age. It's a 10-year non-renewable appointment, and I think the country needs to get behind Advocate Andy Mothibi and the team that he's going to have to put in place in conjunction with the president. The positions of deputy national directors are all vacant at the moment. We saw the resignation of Anton du Plessis towards the end of last year. So those are critical appointments because Andy Mothibi is going to require a strong team around him in order to rebuild on the foundations that have been laid by Advocate Batohi.
Yeah. It'd be remiss of us not to speak about some of the remarks that Advocate Batohi made a few weeks ago about, I think she mentioned something about sabotage or capture within the NPA at some stage. How stressful do you reckon that ought to be for Andy Mothibi? I mean, should he go out of his way to try and clarify all those issues or just begin with his own priorities, given just how much work needs to be done?
Well, hopefully now that the appointment has been announced and there are a few weeks before Shamila Batohi leaves office, that there will be a time for some sort of handover from Batohi to Mothibi to bring him up to speed with the kinds of challenges that the NPA faces, kinds of issues, some of which perhaps Batohi has not been able to publicly speak about, but which he can confide in Mothibi, so that he has a full understanding of the kinds of challenges that are there. What are the real priorities that he needs to focus on? We saw from the Minister of Justice just a couple of days ago her call for lifestyle audits for prosecutors. How is that going to be implemented? What is the time frame for that? It's a costly exercise, and the resources need to be made available. So these are some of the things that hopefully this handover will be able to deal with, so that when Andy Mothibi starts on the 1st of February, he's able to literally hit the ground running.
Yeah. Are there any low-hanging fruits? I mean, we know Andy Mothibi comes from an environment where all you needed to kind of prove, for lack of a better term, is the likelihood of a crime being committed, right? But in the NPA, you need to prove something beyond reasonable doubt. And I ask about low-hanging fruits because when Hermione Khonier was head of IDAC, she spoke a lot about how the NPA is not really able to prosecute financial crimes. And if we look at the seizures that have taken place over the past couple of months, a lot of those involve tracing the money, which typically follows very complex routes as criminals try to hide their tracks.
Yeah, so I think there's an important difference in the framework of the functioning of the SRU and the NPA. As you rightly point out, the SRU operates under the civil law regime, where cases are decided on the balance of probabilities. The SRU has been very successful in bringing back stolen monies from the public purse, whereas the NPA has to prove its cases beyond a reasonable doubt. It needs to conduct much more in-depth investigations, bringing together the evidence as well as the witnesses to be able to carry cases in court. So those are some of the challenges that I think that exist there that were highlighted during the interviews of the candidates last month, which is the capacity constraints, particularly to prosecute these complex commercial crimes that involve, in many cases, cross-border transactions and the like. So this is, there's no short-term fix to that. You build the capacity within the NPA, and that's going to take time and it's going to take resources.
Yeah. Some might say he's in an unenviable position. Congratulations to him nonetheless, and we'll certainly watch the space. Lawson Naidoo, always a pleasure. Thanks for speaking to us. Appreciate the time and the insights. Lawson Naidoo, of course, is the Executive Director at CASAC.